just gonna, while I'm waiting for people to come in, just talk to you in case you're watching the replay. I am Chris Angeles. I'm a singer-songwriter. Usually when I'm live streaming, I'm playing music and singing my songs. But sometimes if we get to the goal, like donation tip goal during the streams, we get to do some Harry Potter bedtime story reading. That's what's happening right now. I've been doing a lot of my music streams on TikTok, if you are wondering. So if you want to follow me on there at Chris Angeles Music, you can see me live on there. I'm trying to work out how to do restream on my phone so I can try to stream to everywhere, even when I'm out at shows. Hi, Will. And I'm going to try to figure out how to do restream for TikTok, but I think it changed and I have to figure that out, but I didn't want to make this any later. Hi, Blair. So we are on chapter 37 of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which is book 5, as you can see. Here we go. Oh. My coffee isn't warm enough. It's not warm enough. I want it to be warmer. All right, I'll just do that. Okay. Chapter 37, The Lost Prophecy. Harry's feet hit solid ground again, his knees buckled a little, and the golden wizard's head fell with a resounding clunk to the floor. He looked around and saw that he had arrived in Dumbledore's office. Everything seemed to have repaired itself during the headmaster's absence. The delicate silver instruments stood again upon the spindle-legged tables, puffing and whirring serenely. The portraits of the headmasters and headmistresses were snoozing in their frames, heads lolling back in armchairs or against the edge of their pictures. Harry looked through the window. There was a cool line of pale green along the horizon. Dawn was approaching. I know. I need to get one of those heated coffee mugs for sure. Or just remember to always put it in one of the... I have like a insulated like travel mug. I should just use that at home. The silence and the stillness, broken only by the occasional grunt or snuffle of a sleeping portrait, was unbearable to him. If his surroundings could have reflected the feelings inside him, the pictures would have been screaming in pain. He walked around the quiet, beautiful office, breathing quickly, trying not to think. But he had to think. There was no escape. It was his fault Sirius had died. It was all his fault. If he, Harry, had not been stupid enough to fall for Voldemort's trick, if he had not been so convinced that what he had seen in his dream was real, if he had only opened his mind to the possibility that Voldemort was, as Hermione had said, banking on Harry's love of playing the hero. Hi, Trevor. Why? It was unbearable. He would not think about it. He could not stand it. There was a terrible hollow inside of him he did not want to feel or examine, a dark hole where Sirius had vanished. He did not want to have to be alone with that great silent space. He could not stand it. A picture behind him gave a particularly loud grunting snore, and a cool voice said, "Ah, Harry Potter." Phineas Nigellus gave a long yawn, stretching his arms as he surveyed Harry out of shrewd, narrow eyes. "And what brings you here in the early hours of the morning?" said Phineas. "This office is supposed to be barred to all but the rightful headmaster." "Or has Dumbledore sent you here? Oh, don't tell me." And he gave another shuddering yawn. See, it worked. It was part of the reading, you guys. "Another message for my worthless great-great-grandson." Harry could not speak. Phineas Nigellus did not know that Sirius was dead, but Harry could not tell him. To say it aloud would be to make it final, absolute, irretrievable. A few more of the portraits had stirred now. Terror of being interrogated made Harry stride across the room and seize the doorknob. It would not turn. He was shut in. "I hope this means," said the corpulent, red-nosed wizard who hung on the wall beside Dumbledore's desk, "that Dumbledore will soon be back with us." Harry turned. The wizard was surveying him with great interest. Harry nodded. He tugged again on the doorknob behind his back, but it remained immovable. "Oh, good," said the wizard. "It has been very dull without him. Very dull indeed." He settled himself on the throne-like chair on which he had been painted and smiled benignly upon Harry. Dumbledore thinks very highly of you, as I am sure you know, he said comfortably. Oh yes, holds you in great esteem. The guilt filling the whole of Harry's chest like some monstrous, weighty parasite now writhed and squirmed. Harry could not stand this. He could not stand being Harry any more. He had never felt more trapped inside his own head and body, never wished so intensely that he could be somebody, anybody else. The empty fireplace burst into emerald green flame, making Harry leap away from the door, staring at the man spinning inside the grate. As Dumbledore's tall form unfolded itself from the fire, the wizards and witches on the surrounding walls jerked awake. Many of them gave cries of welcome. Thank you, said Dumbledore softly. He did not look at Harry at first, but walked over to the perch beside the door and withdrew, from an inside pocket of his robes, the tiny, ugly, featherless fox, whom he placed gently on the tray of the soft ashes beneath the golden post where the full-grown fox usually stood. Well, Harry, said Dumbledore, finally turning away from the baby bird, you will be pleased to hear that none of your fellow students are going to suffer lasting damage from the night's events. Harry tried to say good, but no sound came out. It seemed to him that Dumbledore was reminding him of the amount of damage he had caused by his actions tonight, and although Dumbledore was for once looking at him directly, and though his expression was kindly rather than accusatory, Harry could not bear to meet his eyes. Madame Pomfrey is patching everybody up now, said Dumbledore. Nymphadora Tonks may need to spend a little time in St. Mungo's, but it seems that she will make a full recovery. Harry contented himself with nodding at the carpet, which was growing lighter as the sky outside grew paler. He was sure that all the portraits around the room were listening closely to every word Dumbledore spoke, wondering where Dumbledore and Harry had been and why there had been injuries. I know how you are feeling, Harry, said Dumbledore very quietly. No, you don't, said Harry, and his voice was suddenly loud and strong. White-hot anger leapt inside him. Dumbledore knew nothing about his feelings. You see, Dumbledore, said Phineas Nigellus slyly, never try to understand the students. They hate it. They would much rather be tragically misunderstood. Wallow in self-pity, stew in their own. That's enough, Phineas, said Dumbledore. Harry turned his back on Dumbledore and stared determinedly out of the opposite window. He could see the Quidditch stadium in the distance. Sirius had appeared there once, disguised as the shaggy black dog, so he could watch Harry play. He had probably come to see whether Harry was as good as James had been. Harry had never asked him. There's no shame in what you're feeling, Harry, said Dumbledore's voice. On the contrary, the fact that you feel pain like this is your greatest strength. Harry felt the white-hot anger lick his insides, blazing in the terrible emptiness, filling him with the desire to hurt Dumbledore for his calmness and his empty words. My greatest strength, is it? Said Harry, his voice shaking as he stared out at the Quidditch stadium, no longer seeing it. You haven't got a clue. You don't know. What don't I know? Asked Dumbledore calmly. It was too much. Harry turned around, shaking with rage. I don't want to talk about how I feel, all right? Harry, suffering like this proves you are still a man. This pain is part of being human. Then I don't want to be human, Harry roared, and he seized one of the delicate silver instruments from the spindle-legged table beside him and flung it across the room. It shattered into 100 tiny pieces against the wall. Several of the pictures let out yells of anger and fright, and the portrait of Armando Tippet said, Really? I don't care, Harry yelled at them, snatching up a lunoscope and throwing it into the fireplace. I've had enough. I've seen enough. I want out. I want it to end. I don't care anymore. He seized the table on which the silver instrument had stood and threw that too. It broke apart on the floor, and the legs rolled in different directions. You do care, said Dumbledore. He had not flinched or made a single move to stop Harry demolishing his office. His expression was calm, almost detached. You care so much you feel as though you will bleed to death with the pain of it. I don't! Harry screamed so loudly that he felt his throat might tear, and for a second he wanted to rush at Dumbledore and break him too, shatter that calm old face, shake him, hurt him, make him feel some tiny part of the horror inside Harry. Oh, yes you do, said Dumbledore still more calmly. You have now lost your mother, your father, and the closest thing to a parent you've ever known. Of course you care. You don't know how I feel, Harry roared. You standing there, you... But the words were no longer enough. Smashing things was no more help. He wanted to run. He wanted to keep running and never look back. He wanted to be somewhere he could not see the clear blue eyes staring at him, that hatefully calm old face. He turned on his heel and ran to the door, seized the doorknob, and wrenched at it, but the door would not open. Harry turned back to Dumbledore. Let me out, he said. He was shaking from head to foot. No, said Dumbledore simply. For a few seconds they stared at each other. Let me out, Harry said again. No, Dumbledore repeated. If you keep me here, if you don't let me. By all means, continue destroying my possessions, said Dumbledore serenely. I dare say I have too many. He walked around his desk and sat down behind it, watching Harry. Let me out, Harry said yet again, in a voice that was cold and almost as calm as Dumbledore's. Not until I have had my say, said Dumbledore. Do you think I want to? Do you think I give up? I don't care what you've got to say, Harry roared. I don't want to hear anything you've got to say. You will, said Dumbledore sadly, because you are not nearly as angry with me as you ought to be. If you are to attack me, as I know you are close to doing, I would like to have thoroughly earned it. What are you talking? It is my fault that Sirius died, said Dumbledore clearly, or I should say almost entirely my fault. I will not be so arrogant as to claim responsibility for the whole. Sirius was a brave, clever, and energetic man, and such men are not usually content to sit at home, in hiding while they believe others to be in danger. Nevertheless, you should never have believed for an instant that there was any necessity for you to go to the Department of Mysteries tonight. If I had been open with you, Harry, as I should have been, you would have known a long time ago that Voldemort might try and lure you to the Department of Mysteries, and you would never have been tricked into going there tonight. And Sirius would not have had to come after you. That blame lies with me, and with me alone. Harry was still standing with his hand on the doorknob, but he was unaware of it. He was gazing at Dumbledore, hardly breathing, listening yet barely understanding what he was hearing. What was planned all along? My yawning? Please sit down, said Dumbledore. It was not an order, it was a request. Harry hesitated, then walked slowly across the room, now littered with silver cogs and fragments of wood, and took the seat facing Dumbledore's desk. Am I to understand, said Phineas Nigellus slowly from Harry's left, that my great-great-grandson, the last of the Blacks, is dead? Yes, Phineas, said Dumbledore. I don't believe it, said Phineas brusquely. Harry turned his head in time to see Phineas marching out of his portrait, and knew that he had gone to visit his other painting in Grimmauld Place. He would walk perhaps from portrait to portrait, calling for Sirius through the house. Harry, I owe you an explanation, said Dumbledore. An explanation of an old man's mistakes. For I see now that what I have done, and not done with regard to you, bears all the hallmarks of the failings of age. Youth cannot know how age thinks and feels, but old men are guilty if they forget what it was to be young, and I seem to have forgotten lately. The sun was rising properly now. There was a rim of dazzling orange visible over the mountains, and the sky above it was colorless and bright. The light fell upon Dumbledore, upon the silver of his eyebrows and beard, upon the lines gouged deeply into his face. I guessed 15 years ago, said Dumbledore, when I saw the scar upon your forehead, what it might mean. I guessed that it might be the sign of a connection forged between you and Voldemort. You told me this before, Professor, said Harry bluntly. He did not care about being rude. He did not care about anything very much anymore. Yes, said Dumbledore apologetically. Yes, but you see, it is necessary to start with your scar. For it became apparent, shortly after you rejoined the magical world, that I was correct, and that your scar was giving you warnings when Voldemort was close to you, or else feeling powerful emotion. I know, said Harry wearily. And this ability of yours to detect Voldemort's presence even when he is disguised, and to know what he is feeling when his emotions are roused, has become more and more pronounced since Voldemort returned to his own body and his full powers. Something screeching. Hey, Wiener. Harry did not bother to nod. He knew all of this already. More recently, said Dumbledore, I became concerned that Voldemort might realize that this connection between you exists. Sure enough, there came a time when you entered so far into his mind and thoughts that he sensed your presence. I am speaking, of course, of the night when you witnessed the attack on Mr. Weasley. Yeah, Snape told me, Harry muttered. Professor Snape, Harry. Dumbledore corrected him quietly. But did you not wonder why it was not I who explained this to you? Why I did not teach you occlumency, why I had not so much as looked at you for months? Harry looked up. He could see now that Dumbledore looked sad and tired. Yeah, Harry mumbled. Yeah, I wondered. No, I think it was a bird. I thought it was James at first, but I don't think it is. You see, continued Dumbledore heavily, I believed it could not be long before Voldemort attempted to force his way into your mind. to manipulate and misdirect your thoughts. And I was not eager to give him more incentives to do so. I was sure that if he realized that our relationship was or had ever been closer than that of headmaster and pupil, he would seize his chance to use you as a means to spy on me. I feared the uses to which he would put you, the possibility that he might try and possess you. Harry, I believe I was right to think that Voldemort would have made use of you in such a way. On those rare occasions when he had close contact, I thought I saw a shadow of him stir behind your eyes. I was trying, in distancing myself from you, to protect you. An old man's mistake. Harry remembered the feeling that a dormant snake had risen in him, ready to strike on those occasions when he and Dumbledore made eye contact. Voldemort's aim in possessing you, as he demonstrated tonight, would not have been my destruction, it would have been yours. He hoped, when he possessed you briefly a short while ago, that I would sacrifice you in the hope of killing him. He sighed deeply. Harry was letting the words wash over him. He would have been so interested to know all this a few months ago, and now it was meaningless compared to the gaping chasm inside him that was the loss of Sirius. None of it mattered. Sirius told me that you felt Voldemort awake inside you the very night that you had the vision of Arthur Weasley's attack. I knew at once that my worst fears were correct. Voldemort from that point had realized he could use you. In an attempt to arm you against Voldemort's assaults on your mind, I arranged occlumency lessons with Professor Snape. He paused. Harry watched the sunlight which was sliding slowly across the polished surface of Dumbledore's desk, illuminating a silver inkpot and a handsome scarlet quill. Harry could tell that the portraits all around them were awake and listening raptly to Dumbledore's explanation. He could hear the occasional rustle of robes, the slight clearing of a throat. Phineas Nigellus had still not returned. Professor Snape discovered, Dumbledore resumed, that you had been dreaming about the door to the Department of Mysteries for months. Voldemort, of course, had been obsessed with the possibility of hearing the prophecy ever since he regained his body, and as he dwelled on the door, so did you, though you did not know what it meant. And then you saw Rookwood, who worked in the Department of Mysteries before his arrest, telling Voldemort that we had known all along that the prophecies held in the Ministry of Magic are heavily protected. Only the people to whom they refer can lift them from the shelves without suffering madness. In this case, either Voldemort himself would have had to enter the Ministry of Magic and risk revealing himself at last, or else you would have to take it for him. It became a matter of even greater urgency that you should master occlumency. But I didn't, muttered Harry. He said it aloud to try and ease the dead weight of guilt inside him. A confession must surely relieve some of the terrible pressure squeezing his heart. I didn't practice. I didn't bother. I could have stopped myself having those dreams. Hermione kept telling me to do it. If I had, he'd never been able to show me where to go, and Sirius wouldn't. Sirius wouldn't. Okay, bye, Brad. Why about broken clocks? Something was erupting inside Harry's head, a need to justify himself, to explain. I tried to check he'd really taken Sirius. I went into Umbridge's office. I spoke to Creature in the fire, and he said Sirius wasn't there. He said he'd gone. Creature lied, said Dumbledore calmly. You are not his master. He could lie to you without even needing to punish himself. Creature intended you to go to the Ministry of Magic. He sent me on purpose? Oh yes, Creature, I'm afraid, has been serving more than one master for months. How? Said Harry blankly. He hasn't been out of Grimmauld Place for years. Creature seized his opportunity shortly before Christmas, said Dumbledore, when Sirius apparently shouted at him to get out. He took Sirius at his word and interpreted this as an order to leave the house. He went to the only Black family member for whom he had any respect left, Black's cousin Narcissa, sister of Bellatrix and wife of Lucius Malfoy. How do you know all this? Harry said. His heart was beating very fast. He felt sick. He remembered worrying about Creature's odd absence over Christmas. Remembered him turning up again in the attic. Creature told me last night, said Dumbledore. You see, when you gave Professor Snape that cryptic warning, he realized that you had had a vision of Sirius trapped in the bowels of the Department of Mysteries. He, like you, attempted to contact Sirius at once. I should explain that members of the Order of the Phoenix have more reliable methods of communicating than the fire in Dolores Umbridge's office. Professor Snape found that Sirius was alive and safe in Grimmauld Place. When, however, you did not return from your trip into the forest with Dolores Umbridge, Professor Snape grew worried that you still believed Sirius to be a captive of Lord Voldemort's. He alerted certain Order members at once. Dumbledore heaved a great sigh and then said, Aleister Moody, Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Remus Lupin were at headquarters when he made contact. All agreed to go to your aid at once. Professor Snape requested that Sirius remain behind, as he needed somebody to remain at headquarters to tell me what had happened, for I was due there at any moment. In the meantime, he, Professor Snape, intended to search the forest for you. But Sirius did not wish to remain behind while the others went to search for you. He delegated to Creature the task of telling me what had happened. And so it was that when I arrived in Grimmauld Place shortly after they had left for the ministry, it was the elf who told me, laughing fit to burst, where Sirius had gone. He was laughing? Said Harry in a hollow voice. Oh yes, said Dumbledore. You see, Creature was not able to betray us totally. He is not secret keeper for the Order. He could not give the Malfoys our whereabouts or tell them any of the Order's confidential plans that he had been forbidden to reveal. He was bound by the enchantments of his kind, which is to say that he could not disobey a direct order from his master Sirius, but he gave Narcissa information of the sort that is very valuable to Voldemort. It must have seemed much too trivial for Sirius to think of banning him from repeating it. Like what? Said Harry. Like the fact that the person Sirius cared most about in the world was you, said Dumbledore quietly. Like the fact that you were coming to regard Sirius as a mixture of father and brother. Voldemort knew already, of course, that Sirius was in the Order, that you knew where he was, but Creature's information made him realize that the one person whom you would go to any lengths to rescue was Sirius Black. Harry's lips were cold and numb. So, when I asked Creature if Sirius was there last night, the Malfoys, undoubtedly on Voldemort's instructions, had told him he must find a way of keeping Sirius out of the way once you had seen the vision of Sirius being tortured. Then, if you decided to check whether Sirius was at home or not, Creature would be able to pretend he was not. Creature injured Buckbeak the Hippogriff yesterday, and at the moment when you made your appearance in the fire, Sirius was upstairs trying to tend to him. There seemed to be very little air in Harry's lungs. His breathing was quick and hollow. And Creature told you all this, and laughed. He croaked. He did not wish to tell me, said Dumbledore, but I am a sufficiently accomplished legilimens myself to know when I am being lied to, and I persuaded him to tell me the full story before I left for the Department of Mysteries. And, whispered Harry, his hands curled in cold fists on his knees, and Hermione kept telling us to be nice to him. She was quite right, Harry, said Dumbledore. I warned Sirius when we adopted 12 Grimmauld Place as our headquarters that Creature must be treated with kindness and respect. I also told him that Creature could be dangerous to us. I do not think that Sirius took me very seriously, or that he ever saw Creature as a being with feelings as acute as a human's. Don't you talk about Sirius like... Harry's breath was constricted. He could not get the words out properly, but the rage that had subsided so briefly had flared in him again. He would not let Dumbledore criticize Sirius. Creature's a lying foul. He deserved... Creature is what he has been made by wizards, Harry, said Dumbledore. Yes, he is to be pitied. His existence has been as miserable as your friend Dobby's. He was forced to do Sirius's bidding because Sirius was the last of the family to which he was enslaved, but he felt no true loyalty to him. And whatever Creature's fault, it must be admitted that Sirius did nothing to make Creature's lot easier. Don't talk about Sirius like that, Harry yelled. He was on his feet again, furious, ready to fly at Dumbledore, who had plainly not understood Sirius at all, how brave he was, how much he had suffered. What about Snape? Harry spat. You're not talking about him, are you? When I told him Voldemort had Sirius, he had just sneered at me as usual. Harry, you know that Professor Snape had no choice but to pretend not to take you seriously in front of Dolores Umbridge, said Dumbledore steadily. But as I have explained, he informed the Order as soon as possible about what you had said. It was he who deduced where you had gone when you did not return from the forest. It was he, too, who gave Professor Umbridge fake Veritaserum when she was attempting to force you to tell of Sirius's whereabouts. Harry disregarded this. He felt a savage pleasure in blaming Snape. It seemed to be easing his own sense of dreadful guilt, and he wanted to hear Dumbledore agree with him. Snape goaded Sirius about staying in the house. He made out Sirius was a coward. Sirius was much too old and clever to have allowed such feeble taunts to hurt him, said Dumbledore. Snape stopped giving me occlumency lessons, Harry snarled. He threw me out of his office. I am aware of it, said Dumbledore heavily. I have already said that it was a mistake for me not to teach you myself, though I was sure at the time that nothing could have been more dangerous than to open your mind even further to Voldemort while in my presence. Snape made it worse. My scar always hurt worse after lessons with him, Harry remembered Ron's thoughts on the subject and plunged on. How do you know he wasn't trying to soften me up for Voldemort, make it easier for him to get inside my... I trust Severus Snape, said Dumbledore simply, but I forgot. Another old man's mistake. That some wounds run too deep for the healing. I thought Professor Snape could overcome his feelings about your father. I was wrong. But that's okay, is it? Yelled Harry, ignoring the scandalized faces and disapproving mutters of the portraits covering the walls. It's okay for Snape to hate my dad, but it's not okay for Sirius to hate Creature. Sirius did not hate Creature, said Dumbledore. He regarded him as a servant unworthy of much interest or notice. Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike. The fountain we destroyed tonight told a lie. We wizards have mistreated and abused our fellows for too long, and we are now reaping our reward. So Sirius deserved what he got, did he? Harry yelled. I did not say that, nor will you ever hear me say it. Dumbledore replied quietly. Sirius was not a cruel man. He was kind to house elves in general. He had no love for Creature because Creature was a living reminder of the home Sirius had hated. Yeah, he did hate it, said Harry, his voice cracking, turning his back on Dumbledore and walking away. The sun was bright inside the room now, and the eyes of all the portraits followed him as he walked, without realizing what he was doing, without seeing the office at all. You made him stay shut up in that house, and he hated it. That's why he wanted to get out last night. This is a very long chapter. I was trying to keep Sirius alive, said Dumbledore quietly. People don't like being locked up, Harry said furiously, rounding on him. You did it to me all last summer. Dumbledore closed his eyes and buried his face in his long-fingered hands. Harry watched him, but this uncharacteristic sign of exhaustion or sadness or whatever it was from Dumbledore did not soften him. On the contrary, he felt even angrier that Dumbledore was showing signs of weakness. He had no business being weak when Harry wanted to rage and storm at him. Dumbledore lowered his hands and surveyed Harry through his half-moon glasses. It is time, he said, for me to tell you what I should have told you 5 years ago, Harry. Please sit down. I'm going to tell you everything. I ask only a little patience. You will have your chance to rage at me, to do whatever you like, when I have finished. I will not stop you. And I think that's a good cliffhanger place to stop, because there's like almost another half of that chapter. And we'll do it the next time. Maybe I'll do singing and reading tomorrow. Hi, Dawn. Yes. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Good night, Trev. Good night, Brad. Good night, Dawn. Good night, David. Good night, Will.